A flight attendant tried to kick Dan Blocker out of first class. What happened next shocked you. Before we dive in, don't forget to like and follow for more powerful stories that will stay with you. Now let's begin. The flight was supposed to be uneventful, just another routine journey cruising above the Midwest, with the sun dipping behind cotton candy clouds and a hush over the first-class cabin. Passengers nestled into plush seats, sipping bourbon or thumbing through the airline's glossy magazine. All was calm until the atmosphere subtly shifted. 3 months in the blistering Mojave Desert had left Dan Blocker sun-touched and trail-worn. He'd just wrapped filming, dust still clinging to his jeans, the same boots he'd stomped through canyon valleys in now tracking grit into the polished airport floors. He hadn't even changed clothes. Didn't want to. "I'm not wasting one damn minute," he'd told the driver who dropped him off. And he meant it. All he wanted was to get home, to the porch swing that creaked just right, to the dog that still waited by the gate. So he boarded the plane, wearing exactly what he'd been living in for weeks. A sweat-stained flannel, faded denim, and a Stetson whose brim had known more wind and sun than any city had ever could. The scent of sagebrush still clung to him. Out of place? Maybe, but out of line. Not for a second. A flight attendant, eyes sharp and stride brisk, came to a sudden stop beside a seat in the first row. There sat an older gentleman, broad-shouldered, with a kind face partly hidden beneath that well-worn Stetson. Dust clung to his flannel like it belonged there. His hands rested easily on his stomach, hat tipped forward as though shielding him from more than just the overhead light. She didn't offer a smile. "Sir," she said, voice clipped and businesslike, "you're going to have to move to coach." She saw the boots, scuffed and weathered. She saw the old flannel, the creases and grit in the denim. The whole look didn't read first class. It read truck stop. It read wrong side of the boarding group. To her, he didn't fit. Not with the silk scarves and pressed collars around him. He wasn't dressed like someone who paid 4 figures for legroom. The hum of quiet conversations died down. A few heads lifted. Curiosity peaked. The man didn't flinch. He simply looked up with the patience of someone who'd spent years reading people like books. Without saying a word, he reached into his flannel shirt pocket and produced a folded boarding pass. Bold print. First class. Right there in black and white. He held it out gently, like an offering. She gave it a cursory glance, but her mind was already made up. "There's been a mistake," she insisted. "You're not listed here." Dan Blocker didn't argue, didn't bristle. He just let the boarding pass linger in the space between them, giving her a moment to reconsider. Whispers began to stir in the cabin. One by one, passengers started to recognize him. Not just a face, but that face. The gentle giant from old Western reruns. A man who once rode through Sunday afternoons on millions of American screens. A man who looked now like he'd just ridden straight off the set and into this plane. But the young attendant, certain in her authority and blind to history, only saw someone who didn't fit the picture she had in mind. One row back, a man in a navy blazer leaned close to his wife and murmured, "Isn't that Dan Blocker?" She nodded slowly, eyes fixed on the unfolding scene. "I'm where I'm supposed to be," Dan finally said, voice low and steady. "You might want to double-check." The attendant folded her arms, planting her feet. "I don't need to check. This is first class. You're in the wrong seat." The hush thickened. Someone pulled out a phone. Recording began. Just a faint red light blinking. Further down the aisle, another crew member caught the tension and, after a brief pause, turned on her heel and headed to the front. Within seconds, a flight supervisor arrived, a calm presence in a blazer, her expression unreadable. She leaned toward Dan, voice respectful. "Sir, can I take a look at your ticket?" He handed it over without hesitation. She glanced from the pass to her tablet, then back to the first attendant. "This is his seat." A beat of silence followed. A few passengers exchanged knowing looks. A quiet, from a silver-haired woman near the window. But the young attendant wasn't finished. She stepped back and lifted her chin. He's causing a disturbance. And just like that, the energy shifted again. Something flickered across Dan's face. Disappointment, maybe. Or the weariness of someone who'd lived long enough to see dignity mistaken for defiance. It wasn't the first time someone had judged him by the dust on his boots. It wouldn't be the last. Across the aisle, a woman in a charcoal suit let out a long sigh. "This is ridiculous," she muttered. A middle-aged man leaned forward. "Ma'am, with all due respect, you're the one making this a problem." But the flight attendant stayed locked in her mission. "I'll have to escalate this," she said, touching her earpiece. "Doubling down," the businessman whispered to his wife. "Not smart." Tension rippled again through the cabin. Phones were up now. The moment had shifted from awkward to documented. The supervisor took a deep breath, already calculating the fallout. "Miss, can I speak to you privately for a moment?" she asked, voice calm but firm. But the younger woman shook her head, speaking louder now. "He's refusing to comply. He's becoming aggressive." And just like that, the air grew heavier, as if everyone in the cabin had simultaneously held their breath. The shift came fast, sharp and jarring, like a match struck in a quiet room. It wasn't just a misunderstanding anymore. It was the kind of moment that could spiral into a headline by the time the plane touched down. Passengers glanced around, eyebrows lifting, whispers surfacing like ripples in a pond. The woman in the navy blazer stood abruptly. No, he's not. I've been watching the whole time," someone chimed in from across the aisle. The flight attendant's eyes darted from one face to another, her mouth tight, her chest rising faster. Her eyes landed again on Dan's worn boots, his dusty flannel, the sun-faded hat that sat too naturally on his head. Too natural. Something about his stillness, his size, the stubborn silence in his posture. It unnerved her in all the wrong ways. I don't think this is just a seat issue," she stammered, voice raised a touch higher. "He boarded wearing the same clothes you'd wear if you were hiding something. He hasn't changed, hasn't said a word, and he keeps his hat down like he doesn't want anyone to see him. How do we know he doesn't have something dangerous?" The words cut through the cabin like a knife. Gasps, sharp turns of the head, disbelief. Someone audibly dropped their drink. A younger woman near the window gawked, then stood up halfway out of her seat. "What the hell are you even saying? You think he's a, bomber just because his shirt has dust on it?" The flight attendant spun around, her voice shrill now. "Ma'am, sit down immediately or I'll report you too. I'm responsible for passenger safety and I'm telling you this man is suspicious." "Suspicious of what?" the businessman barked from the aisle. "He's been sitting there silently the whole time, drinking water and minding his damn business. You're out of line." Her hand shot to her earpiece. Security protocol says nothing about kicking someone out because they look like they've worked outdoors for a living," someone muttered from the back. A murmur of agreement rolled through the cabin like thunderclouds. Dan still hadn't moved. Then, 2 rows back, a teenager with shaggy hair and a hoodie suddenly lit up, phone raised in one hand. "Wait, holy crap, that's Dan Blocker," he whispered, then said louder, "Ma'am, do you even know who you're trying to throw off this plane?" Miss Reynolds' voice snapped. "I don't care who he thinks he is." No, the kid grinned, flipping his phone around and showing her the screen. "Bonanza, lady. That's Hoss Cartwright. He's a legend." And just like that, it hit her. Her eyes flicked to the phone, and her whole posture faltered. The color drained from her cheeks as she stared at the unmistakable image of a younger Dan, bigger than life in a cowboy hat, a warm smile from another era, on a streaming platform screen. There was no denying it now. She'd picked the wrong man. She'd chosen dust over dignity, and lost the room. A silence fell so thick it felt like gravity doubled. The businessman leaned back with a scoff. Jesus. She thought Dan Blocker was smuggling explosives because his jeans had dirt on them. A silver-haired woman near the window muttered, "This is disgusting." But Miss Reynolds was unraveling. I have the right to feel unsafe. And we have the right to not fly with someone who abuses authority." the woman in the navy suit snapped. Phones were raised now like weapons. The businessman twisted in his seat. "What's your name again?" he asked, recording. The tension didn't vanish. It lingered, thick in the air like a summer storm that hadn't quite broken. Passengers adjusted in their seats, trading glances like whispered agreements. A few phones kept recording, waiting to see if things would escalate again. And Dan, he just sat there, his Stetson low over his brow, a quiet pillar of calm in the middle of the chaos. A few rows back, a man in a ball cap nudged his wife. "This is going to be viral before we even land." She nodded, already scrolling. "It already is." The first clip had hit X, formerly Twitter, 5 minutes ago. 30 seconds of Miss Reynolds trying to boot Dan Blocker from first class. No context, no lead-up. Just her voice demanding he move, his calm refusal, the hum of disbelief in the background. Retweets climbing by the second. "This flight attendant really tried to kick Dan Blocker out of first class," one post read. "Somebody come get her." Another clip had someone overlay the Bonanza theme music over Dan's silent, steely expression. The businessman caught a glimpse of the clip over his wife's shoulder and let out a dry chuckle. "She just torched her career." The chime from the cockpit interrupted the moment. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking." His voice was calm, measured, professional under pressure. But everyone knew that tone meant something serious was brewing. The supervisor reappeared at the front of the cabin, her face unreadable but firm. She scanned the cabin, then looked directly at Reynolds. "Miss Reynolds, step into the galley. Now." "But now!" Miss Reynolds stood rigid for a moment, eyes darting around for an ally. This time, her demeanor shifted. She cleared her throat, squared her shoulders, and met Dan Blocker's eyes with a practiced steadiness. "Mr. Blocker, I want to offer a personal apology for the confusion earlier." And just like that, the tension snapped back into a fragile balance. A few passengers nodded in quiet approval. A soft ripple of polite clapping followed. One guy in a tailored suit smirked like he'd seen this coming. Dan didn't rise, didn't speak, just gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod. That was all he needed. The apology hung in the air, official now, impossible to retract. Down below, the ground seemed to be catching up to the storm that had brewed in the sky. The cabin buzzed, not with idle conversation, but with something heavier. Anticipation. Residual heat. The sense that whatever just happened hadn't fully landed yet. Sure, the flight supervisor had said her piece, but nobody believed this thing was wrapped up with a bow. Miss Reynolds still hadn't come back. The murmurs had turned into hushed but steady conversations. First class felt less like a quiet premium service and more like a courtroom awaiting a verdict. Then, a soft notification chimed on the businessman's phone. He looked down, and a chuckle slipped out under his breath. It was everywhere. Social feeds were already lit. Dan Blocker caught in wild mid-air confrontation with airline staff. Another clip surfaced, this one shot from across the aisle, catching the exact moment Miss Reynolds pointed a finger and declared Dan was making her uneasy. The internet didn't hold back. She's toast. She's absolutely done. Big guy didn't even flinch. Let the net do the talking. Legend didn't need a single word. The woman in the navy blue pantsuit turned to Dan, eyebrows raised. "You know this is gonna blow up, right?" Dan finally spoke, voice like warm gravel, calm but firm. "Ain't my first rodeo." She grinned. "Maybe not, but for her, feels like her first and last." A soft metallic click echoed overhead. The intercom crackled to life. The captain spoke, still composed, still professional. But this time, something had shifted. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. We're now making our final approach into Dallas. Flight crew, prepare for landing." The timing wasn't a coincidence. It never was. This wasn't just a descent to the tarmac. It was damage control, wrapped in procedural calm. Passengers traded looks. The businessman leaned toward his wife and whispered, "They've got people waiting for her at the gate." A few seats back, someone muttered, "You think she knows?" She didn't. The landing gear hit the runway with a thud. The usual announcements followed, but no one in first class moved a muscle. They were waiting. Miss Reynolds reappeared at last. Her face had gone pale, her lips pulled tight like she was clenching back regret. She wasn't walking with that brisk, clipped confidence anymore. Now, she walked like someone trying too hard to seem unaffected, while knowing damn well that every eye in that cabin was fixed on her. And they were. She didn't glance at Dan, didn't offer acknowledgement, but she didn't have to. Everyone else had already seen enough. Phones tilted, cameras subtly angled. Some folks weren't even subtle anymore. The businessman checked his phone again, reading the latest number out loud to no one in particular. 3.2 million. Miss Reynolds caught the glance, saw the screen, saw the headline in bold. Flight attendant picks the wrong fight. The woman in the navy blue leaned over once more and whispered to Dan, "She's gonna wish she'd called in sick today." The seatbelt light dinged, clicks of buckles, soft thuds of overhead bins opening. But still, nobody in first class was in a hurry. They were waiting for the next chapter. And right then, the real story began. A sharply dressed airline official stepped onto the plane, flanked by two others in matching navy blazers. They weren't here for a head count, or to double-check boarding passes. No, they had come for her. Miss Reynolds barely had time to blink before the first man, a serious-looking fellow in his 40s with lines carved deep into his brow, bent down and murmured something into her ear. Whatever he said drained the color from her face like water circling a sink. The passengers shifted in their seats, some stealing glances, others pretending to be lost in their phones. But the air was different now, tight, heavy, electric. A few travelers even put their phones down, maybe out of pity, maybe just waiting for the fireworks. But there weren't any. No yelling, no tears. Just a silent nod between officials, and Miss Reynolds, once confident and composed, now walking down the aisle like a ghost in heels, escorted quietly but firmly off the aircraft. It was surgical, swift, clean, and impossible to ignore. A few people clapped. Others chuckled, low and knowing. From his seat near the front, Dan Blocker watched it unfold. He shook his head slowly, like a man watching the final domino fall. "She really thought nobody would notice," he muttered under his breath. Rising from his seat, he brushed a hand over his sport coat, straightened his spine, and stepped into the aisle. As he passed the supervisor, he gave a small nod. She returned it without a word, but the message was clear. Then he walked off the plane, solid, steady, like a man who'd done what needed to be done. Behind him, the online world roared to life. The terminal pulsed with low chatter and the soft whir of rolling suitcases. Passengers spilled out of the jet bridge, eyes glued to phones, fingers darting across screens. The energy clung to Dan like heat in July. People weren't just whispering, they were waiting. Airport security lingered near the gate, not for him, but for her. Miss Reynolds marched a few steps ahead, shoulders stiff, the collar of her blazer slightly crooked, trailed by the same two officials. She wasn't in handcuffs. But this didn't feel far from a perp walk. Her pride, neatly pressed just an hour ago, now lay wrinkled and sagging around her like an invisible straitjacket. A couple of bystanders held up phones, pretending to check the time, but the lenses said otherwise. A businessman from first class sauntered by, scrolling his phone, a grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. "It's live," he murmured, not to anyone in particular. That was the real sting. This wasn't some internal HR screw-up to be swept under the rug by Monday morning. This was now. This was the digital firing squad, and the bullets were made of pixels and public shame. A teenager slouched near a column, hoodie half-zipped, giggling as he scrolled. "Bro, these memes are nuts," he said, twisting his screen toward his friend. Someone had pasted Miss Reynolds' face onto an old Western movie villain poster, greasy, wild-eyed, with the caption, "You feel entitled, ma'am?" Dan stepped into the terminal, boots hitting the floor with a slow, even rhythm. He had no destination. No one was waiting. But the crowd moved with him anyway, like dust trailing a storm. A Delta employee, wrong airline but polite all the same, approached with a half-apologetic smile. "Mr. Blocker, I just wanted to say—" He raised a hand, palm out. "It's done." She paused, lips parting slightly, then nodded and stepped back. That was the thing about Dan. When he said it was over, it was. But for Miss Reynolds, this was only the beginning. A quiet room waited, sterile, windowless, the kind of place where bad news wears a tie. Frosted glass, taupe walls, a long oak table meant for confessions and consequences. Miss Reynolds sat with her hands laced tightly in front of her, knuckles white. Across from her sat two men in dark suits. Not security, not HR. Corporate. The taller man leaned in, elbows planted. "Miss Reynolds, are you fully aware of the weight of this situation?" She took a long breath. "I made a mistake." The older man, silver hair, face unreadable, tilted his head slightly and tapped a tablet resting on the table. "A mistake?" His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "You provoked an incident with a high-profile passenger. You bypassed protocol. You tried to escalate things using false information." "That's not a mistake, Miss Reynolds. That's several." She hesitated, picking her words like broken glass. "I misread the situation." The taller man let out a soft exhale. "This situation, Miss Reynolds, has already been seen by over 8 million people in 4 hours." He tapped the screen again. "Every news outlet's picked it up. There are boycott threads going viral. And your name? It's trending higher than an international crisis." She blinked. "What?" The older man didn't say anything, just slid the tablet across the table. She paused just a moment, then dared to look. The screen glared back at her. Breaking news, headlines moving faster than she could process. Flight attendant tries to remove Dan Blocker, gets removed instead. Below that, a slow-motion train wreck of numbers, a live counter ticking up, retweets flying like sparks, comment threads unraveling longer than any promotion she'd ever hoped for. At the top, a tweet pinned like a head on a spike. This girl really thought she was the main character. LMAO. Her stomach lurched, nausea rising like heat. The tall man beside her rubbed his temples, his voice low but laced with finality. "The CEO just got off the phone with our biggest investor." He didn't have to say more. It echoed anyway. "You're done. Your employment with this airline is terminated, effective immediately." She opened her mouth, found nothing inside it but static, then shut it again. A silence stretched, cold, brutal, and unforgiving. The older man leaned back in his chair, the sentence already history. "You should take the staff exit. If you head into the terminal, the press will be on you before you hit the parking lot." She nodded, hollow. This job had been her identity, her ladder, her armor. And in one turbulent shift, one moment of ego, it had been ripped away. Dan was already in the car when the airline released its statement. He hadn't waited for it, didn't need the theater. But the buzz on his phone lit up just the same as he stared out the window, where Los Angeles blurred into gold and neon. "We sincerely apologize to Mr. Blocker for the unacceptable treatment he endured on our flight. The staff member involved has been dismissed. We are taking immediate steps to ensure this never happens again." It was the kind of apology that cost nothing and meant even less. Predictable. Forgettable. The businessman from first class had texted him by then. They threw her under the bus. Of course they did. That's the choreography. You play the game, you bet wrong, and you live with what's left. The car moved like a shadow through the city, reflections of diner signs and traffic lights slipping across the windshield. Dan barely looked down when his phone vibrated again. More texts, more noise. He'd lived this story too many times. New players, same mess. A corporation fumbles, Twitter burns, someone gets sacrificed, the wolves feast, and the world scrolls on. His driver, clean cut, probably late 30s, with a look that said ex-Marine or ex-bouncer, finally broke the silence. That was wild back there. Dan exhaled slow through his nose. "You been keeping up with the news, kid?" The driver chuckled. "Didn't have to. Whole terminal was buzzing before your boots even hit the ground." He glanced up in the rear view. "You think she deserved it?" Dan didn't answer right away. He'd seen people dig their own graves for decades. Some earned the dirt. Some just stumbled into it. This girl, though? She was green, cocky, thought she had control of the wheel. She didn't. He finally said it. "She bet against the wrong man." The driver gave a low whistle. Damn right she did. Back at airline headquarters, another kind of turbulence was shaking the walls. The damage control meeting had started before the press release even went live. Executives circled a glass conference table, their screens glowing like warning lights in a cockpit. The PR director, sleek ponytail, eyes sharp as tacks, clicked through slide after slide. Engagement's still climbing. 70% of it's negative. Calls for boycotts are trending. Influencers are on it now. Ye, the CEO, mid-50s, suit tailored to a man who's never stood in a TSA line, pinched the bridge of his nose, voice tight. Worst case? A young analyst, barely out of grad school, cleared his throat. Lawsuits, hearings. If this turns into a broader debate on bias or celebrity privilege, we could be looking at a congressional inquiry. The air went heavy. The CEO's eyes narrowed. And the best? The PR lead shrugged. Internet forgets in a week. She paused. Not if Blocker keeps talking. Silence tightened like a noose. The CEO leaned back. Has he said anything? A shake of the head. Not yet. No statements. No press briefings. Not a whisper past that leaked memo. And it was bad. Ugly, even. But Dan Blocker didn't need to say a word. His silence carried more weight than any prepared speech. At headquarters, the CEO tapped his knuckles against the conference table, slow and deliberate. "Where are we with Reynolds?" he asked, voice tight. "She's toast," the PR director said flatly. "No airline will touch her now. She's getting death threats." "She pulled the plug on all her socials an hour ago," someone added, barely above a whisper. A long silence settled over the room. Cutting someone loose was one thing. Watching them get torn to pieces in public was something else. A junior analyst shifted in his seat, eyes darting nervously. "Look, yeah, we had to let her go, but now it's turning into a witch hunt." The CEO didn't flinch. "So?" "She screwed up," the analyst said, softer now. "But people think we just stood by and watched. That's sticking to us more than the mistake itself." The PR director clicked her pen twice before speaking. "We ride this one out. No statements. No corrections. Don't give it oxygen." The CEO exhaled, long and sharp. "Fine. Just pray Blocker doesn't say anything." But every soul in that boardroom knew. They weren't driving the narrative anymore. Miles away, in a dim apartment just off Wilshire, Miss Reynolds sat slouched on her carpet, back against the couch, a half-drained bottle of grocery store Cabernet beside her. Her phone lay face down on the coffee table, the TV buzzed with sound, but she wasn't really watching. She already knew the script. Former flight attendant becomes a national punchline. A 5-minute meltdown becomes a career eulogy. Internet's latest scapegoat. Who's next? No tears now. That phase had passed. Just a hollow ache where panic used to be. Her inbox was a landfill of hate. Friends had gone quiet. Even her parents' voices when they called were pinched with shame. She fumbled for the remote, flipped through news channels like they were static, praying for something, anything, not about her. And then she saw it. Bottom third of the screen. Dan Blocker breaks silence on airline scandal. Her pulse spiked. She grabbed her phone, hands shaking as she unlocked it. The post was plain. No hashtags, no PR gloss, just 5 words. "Folks mess up. Let her be." At the Blocker Ranch in New Mexico, a soft fire glowed behind a stone hearth. Dan eased his phone down beside his whiskey glass, leaned back in his leather chair, and took a slow sip. He didn't speak for show. He spoke when it counted. And for him, this moment was enough. But for the rest of the country, it was a shot heard round the internet. His 5-word truth dropped like thunder. Folks mess up. Let her be. It took seconds to spread. Talk shows, podcasts, morning radio, even celebrities caught the wave. The same online mob that had shredded Miss Reynolds barely 12 hours ago just stopped. If Blocker says move on, then maybe we move on, one tweet read. Dude just stepped out of nowhere like an old cowboy, said his piece, and now we're all reevaluating our lives. So we're just gonna pretend we didn't demand her head on a pike this morning? The shift in mood was jarring. Miss Reynolds stared at her screen, reading the changing tide. No more pitchforks, just cautious sympathy, a little grace, then a ping. New message. She hesitated, saw the name, her breath caught. Dan Blocker. Fingers trembling, she opened it. The message was short, even shorter than the tweet. You'll be okay. Just stand up. She stared at it, read it again, and again, eyes stinging. And for the first time in 2 days, she breathed. That was all he said. No lecture, no guilt trip, no soft landing, just get up. The half-full glass of red sat untouched on the coffee table, the remnants of 2 sleepless nights. She exhaled, laid the phone down slowly, and, like shedding a skin, she stood. Meanwhile, inside the executive conference room at the airline's headquarters in Atlanta, the crisis team was burning through their 3rd pot of coffee. The PR director pressed her fingers into her temples, weary. We're fielding media inquiries asking if we're walking this back. The CEO leaned back in his leather chair with a sigh. Seriously? She pushed her iPad toward him. This morning they wanted her blacklisted. Now it's all, did we overreact? He rubbed his jaw, the fatigue visible. We're not bringing her back. That train's left the station. The same junior analyst from earlier cleared his throat. Technically, sir, we never issued formal termination. She was pulled from the roster, sure, but there's no paper trail confirming a dismissal. The PR director's eyes narrowed. You're suggesting we walk it back? Just like that? He shrugged, cautious but deliberate. I'm saying, if we play this smart, we walk out clean. The room fell silent. The CEO leaned in, eyes sharp. What's your angle? The analyst tapped his screen. Blocker said let her go. That was it. He's not lobbying for her. He's letting the story shift on its own. Public sentiment's already pivoting. We don't need to do anything. Just don't resist it. The PR director folded her arms. So, what? We stay quiet? He smirked. We leak that her case is under review. Let the public run with it. If they push hard enough, we bring her back. Not as an apology, but as a redemption. Second chances play well on morning TV. The CEO exhaled deeply. And if she turns us down? The analyst smiled. Then we still look like the good guys. By morning, Ms. Reynolds' phone lit up. She stared at the screen, thumb hovering over decline. But something about the way Blocker had said it, quiet, resolute, get up, made her answer. Hello? The voice was corporate velvet. Ms. Reynolds? This is Emily Davenport from Airline Management. We'd like to speak with you regarding your future with us. Her grip tightened. Didn't know I had one. A pause, calculated. Situations evolve. We'd like to invite you in to explore a potential reinstatement. Reinstatement? The word rang strange in her ears. She leaned back, eyes flicking to the television where a panel of morning anchors debated her like she was a bill up for vote. The tide had turned, not because she fought for it, not because the airline had mercy, but because Dan Blocker had drawn a line and walked away. That single, silent act changed everything. She almost laughed. What if I say no? Another pause. The voice on the other end softened just enough to be menacing. We'd hate to see a promising career end over one lapse in judgment. She glanced at her screen, thought of Blocker's text. Just get up. And for the first time in what felt like years, she felt steady, in control. She smiled. All right, folks, now I know what you're thinking. Was that story real? And the answer is, no, it wasn't. This story is fictional. But the lessons, the emotion, the message, that's as real as it gets. Sometimes it takes a made-up moment to shine a light on the very real issues we face every day. Judgment, prejudice, how we treat others based on appearance, or the power of staying calm in a storm. And Dan Blocker, fictionalized or not, represents something we're all craving more of in this world. Quiet strength, dignity, and grace under pressure. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't fight back. He let the truth and the people around him speak for him. And when the moment came, he chose forgiveness over vengeance. That's not just classy. That's powerful. This story reminds us that we often jump to conclusions. We assume, we act on impulse. And sometimes it takes one person's stillness to hold up a mirror to the chaos. So, yeah, Dan Blocker may not have actually ridden a plane home covered in desert dust, but his spirit, that calm, grounded energy, that's the kind of character we could use more of, in stories and in life. If this story hit you like it hit me, drop a comment below. What would you have done in that cabin? Have you ever been misjudged? Or maybe you've witnessed grace like Dan's in real life? Let's talk about it. I'm reading all your thoughts, and you know I love hearing from you. Thanks for hanging out with me. See you in the next story. Stay kind, stay grounded, and hey, don't forget to get up.